The village of Dunrow was a haven untouched by time, hidden deep within a lush valley encircled by jagged mountains. The people lived simple lives, tending to their flocks and fields, their existence as quiet and unchanging as the mist that clung to the landscape. For decades, outsiders rarely visited, but when they did, they often left with a sense of unease, unable to shake the feeling that something in Dunrow watched them closely. Ethan Rees was not easily unnerved, a traveler with a love of old places and forgotten stories. He had heard whispers of Dunrow and its peculiar ways. Drawn by curiosity, he made the arduous trek to the secluded village. The beauty of the place struck him immediately. The air was crisp, the scenery idyllic, but beneath the surface, a strange tension hung in the air. The villagers welcomed Ethan politely, but their smiles seemed forced, their eyes darting nervously. And always, at the periphery of his vision, he noticed them, the Watchers. They were a group of men, their appearances as stark and unyielding as the mountains. Dressed in dark, unadorned clothing, they moved with a purposeful stillness that made them seem like living statues. They never joined in the villagers' chatter or work, yet their presence was constant, their watchful eyes taking in everything. Ethan's questions about them were met with evasive answers. "They're the Watchers," an elderly woman said, avoiding his gaze. "They've always been here." "What do they do?" "They keep us safe," she whispered, her voice trembling. "From the dark things." It wasn't long before Ethan noticed that the Watchers were not mere spectators. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, they gathered at the edge of the village, standing in a perfect circle, their heads bowed, their hands clasped in silent prayer, their collective stillness unnerving. The villagers stayed indoors during these rituals, their windows shuttered tight. Ethan's curiosity got the better of him. One evening, he followed the Watchers, staying far enough behind to avoid being noticed. They moved toward a forest path, their procession almost ceremonial. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper, and Ethan felt an inexplicable sense of dread. At last, they reached a clearing where a circle of ancient stones jutted from the ground. The Watchers arranged themselves around a central monolith that seemed to hum faintly. As they began to chant, Ethan hid behind a tree, straining to hear. Their voices were low and guttural, speaking in a language he didn't recognize. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a dark mist began to seep from the forest floor, coiling like living tendrils. Ethan's breath caught as he saw shapes within the mist. Amorphous, shifting figures with glowing eyes. The Watchers raised their hands, their voices rising in unison, and the mist recoiled, retreating back into the earth. Ethan stumbled back to the village, his mind racing. Whatever he had witnessed was beyond his understanding. The Watchers were not ordinary men. They were guardians, warding off something ancient and malevolent. Over the following days, Ethan pieced together fragments of the village's history from old books and reluctant villagers. Centuries ago, Dunrow had been built atop a rift, a place where the fabric between worlds was thin. The rift was a gateway, and from it came the Mistborn, beings of shadow and hunger. The Watchers were descendants of the first Guardians, bound by a sacred oath to keep the rift sealed. They wielded ancient knowledge passed down through generations, their rituals a barrier against the Mistborn. But the cost was high. The Watchers lived apart from the villagers, their lives consumed by their duty. Ethan's discovery left him torn. The Watchers were not the enemy. They were protecting the village from a far greater evil. Yet he couldn't ignore the fear and isolation their presence inspired among the villagers. Then, one fateful night, the rift stirred again. The air grew heavy with an unnatural chill, and a deep, resonant hum filled the valley. The Watchers mobilized, their expressions grim. This time, the Mistborn were not retreating. They were pushing through, drawn by the weakening of the seal. Ethan, feeling both fear and a strange sense of responsibility, joined the Watchers at the clearing. The ancient stones glowed faintly as the rift opened, spilling darkness into the world. The Watchers formed a protective circle, their chants rising in desperation. Ethan noticed one of the stones was cracked, its light flickering. The rift surged toward it, the Mistborn pressing against the weakened barrier. Acting on instinct, Ethan grabbed a nearby staff etched with symbols and slammed it into the ground near the damaged stone. The symbols flared to life, their light spreading to the stone, mending the crack. The Mistborn screamed, their forms dissolving as the barrier strengthened. The rift pulsed once more before closing, leaving the clearing in silence. The Watchers turned to Ethan, their expressions unreadable. "You've seen too much," their leader said, his voice low but steady. "And yet, you've proven yourself." Ethan nodded, understanding what they meant. He couldn't leave Dunrow now, not with the knowledge he carried. The Watchers had gained an ally, and the village another unseen protector. As the mist settled over the valley once more, Ethan accepted his place among the Watchers, knowing their eternal vigil would now be his as well. The villagers would never know the full extent of what had been averted that night, but Dunrow would remain safe, for now.